you guys doing? You guys having a good time? Yeah. I want to welcome you guys to Music and Video Games. We have 5 of the, I'm going to tell you right now, the top composers in the industry who've handled some of the greatest games that you guys will ever play. Okay? So we're going to be playing a little bit of their music when we introduce them, so you guys know what they're tied to. We've got some great talent here, and also I'm going to say this a couple times while we're up here. After the show, we're going to be down at booth 471. You can shake some hands, get some autographs, talk some games, talk some music, all right? So let's get this started. Sorry, I'm going to be looking at my MP3 player because I got to get some music up for you guys. What we have, so the first person I'm going to introduce to you guys is Greg Edmonson. Greg is best known for the Uncharted series. This is Nate's theme too. Greg, if you want to go ahead and wave your hand and say hi to everybody. Greg, on top of the Uncharted series, Greg is also tied to the Firefly series, if you guys know that TV show. Yeah. So, very, very cool. So feel free, besides the game, to go ahead and ask him some questions about that. And this song you're hearing right now is called Nate's Theme 2.0. This is from Uncharted 2. So we're going to give you a little, we're going to let you listen to this for a second, all right? Sean Murray is known for one of the top games that's on the multiplayer circuit right now. Sean handled the composing for the music in the single player, Black Ops. Mr. Sean Murray. So Sean also was tied to the Buffy the Vampire Slayer TV series. And this song here is called Hard Target from the Black Ops series. Inon. I hope I said that right. Mr. Zur is Dragon Age Origins 2. Terrific composer, guys. Mr. Zur, go ahead and give up. This, what you're listening to now, is actually the Dragon Age Origins theme. Schyman, who is tied to one of my favorite series, the BioShock series.
Ow!
The song that we're going to listen from Mr. Schyman is Welcome to Rapture. Another one of the Black Ops composers. He actually handled a lot of the music in the Black Ops Zombie series, which I know a lot of you know. He also he's helped on some of the weapon sounds, some of the other stuff you heard in the game too. He's done quite. Besides music, he does some other stuff there. That is Mr. Kevin Sherwood. The title that we're going to listen to from Mr. Sherwood is 115. Who, by the way, also a mutual friend of mine and Kevin's, Elena, is the singer on this song. She's not here, but she's a good friend of ours too. I'm just going to throw a shout out to her real quick. So how we're going to handle this today, guys, is we're going to get a little info from all the composers and how they got into the industry, exactly what they think of the whole gaming industry and music, and how it makes us feel while we're playing these games. Because obviously, without that, you wouldn't get that feeling. You'd be playing something a little blank. So I'm going to throw it off to them, and then we're going to grab a couple questions from you. And again, please stop by the booth for some autographs and questions, and to get some photos with these guys. All right? So I think we're going to throw it over here. I'm going to let Greg start first and give you a little information on how he got in the industry and how his feelings of it, and how he's been dealing with it, all right?
My story is likely to be unique because I really was not a gamer early on. And I had done a TV show called Firefly. And Naughty Dog was making a demo for E3 for the start of the Uncharted series. And they called me and they said, would you be interested in doing it? And I said, I really don't think so. It's not anything I know. And you should, not that I don't want to work. I mean, I want the work, but I want someone to do you a good job. So you need someone who really understands what it is that you need. And they said, oh, come on and give it a shot. And I did. And I look back now and thank God I did not throw that opportunity away, because it has been so fun for me. But I never tried to get into the industry. The industry just found me. Writing for games is so much fun when you have a team of people who are trying to do something so special. And I gotta say, Naughty Dog is really my only experience. They tried so hard on Uncharted 2 to make the player feel as though they were in a movie. So it was not just gameplay, it was not just music, it was not just graphics. It was driven by a storyline and really good actors. so that hopefully the experience was fun in the gameplay sense. It was also fun in the story sense, so that you felt like you were immersed in a story that had a start, had characters that you cared about, and had a story arc that took you on a unique journey. Of course, I can't say if it struck you as that way, but that was their intent. And I consider myself very, very lucky to be working in this industry. I'm thrilled.
Well, I'm going to tell you, I'm going to bring Sean into this. Sean, again, with Black Ops. How did you get into the video game industry? Was Black Ops your first forte into that, or did you start somewhere else?
My first video game was True Crime Streets of LA back in 2003 for Activision. I had come from television and the theatrical movie world and had never scored for a game before. And so it was new to me, and I was really not a gamer much at all. My brother-in-law was an art director over at Lexaflux at Activision. And he had given some of my music to the head of the company, a guy named Peter Morwick. And he was familiar with my work from Buffy and some of the films I had done, and liked my music a lot, and asked me to do a couple of cutscenes. So I scored a couple of the cutscenes, and they seemed to like it. And what they did, which was interesting, they had everybody in the company vote on who they wanted to score in the game. And they had a few other demos. And most everybody voted for me to do it, and that's how I got in. It was just a great experience. I really loved working on it. And you had the great talents of Christopher Walken and also Garry Oldman was a voice in that as well. So it was very much like doing a film, but a little more fun, different type of people than you have in the film industry.
Very good. Now, Inon, we're going to talk with you now. The Dragon Age series, I played a little bit of the first games. The music held quite a bit of strength on that game. It kind of got you. It got you into the game. There was a lot of feeling with it. So I want to know how did you step into the whole video game market? Was it an accident, or were you looking into it?
It was very, very much accidental. In 1996 through 2000, I worked at Fox Family Channel. I wrote about 200 episodes for Power Rangers, Beetleborgs, Digimon, Escaflowne, you name it. And at some point in 1997, there was a voice, very deep voice, calling me through my telephone and has said, "Hello, would you like to compose music for a video game?" The name of the gentleman was Bob Rice, and he's, so far until today, is my manager. He's a great guy, but I said, "No, I'm sorry, I'm not a gamer, not interested." And that was it. But lucky enough, the guy was very, very persistent. So he kept on calling and sending demos and sending that. And eventually I got convinced, and I'm so lucky I did. Since then I did, I think, close to 50 games. Wow. Including all the Fallout series, Crysis, all the Dragon Age series, Rift, EverQuest, a lot.
Now, Garry, I can't say enough about the BioShock franchise, let alone what we hear when we're playing that game. I mean, how did you get into that? I mean, how did BioShock fall into that?
Well, I really got it. If you go back in my history, I got into the video game industry twice, got out of it once. I mean, in the mid-'90s, a friend of mine started to work at a company called Philips Interactive, which they had their own platform called CDI Technology. Philips Interactive made games for that technology. And so I actually scored some games in the mid-'90s, early Game Club era, and had one of the first orchestral scores for a video game. But then when that company went out of business, I just continued working. I was working as a film and TV composer, and that and video game music wasn't all that interesting in the mid-90s. But then in 2004, I had an agent who actually just sent my resume over to THQ, and someone saw it on a fax machine. It was my girlfriend's roommate in college, literally. He said, "Oh, I know him. You should listen to his music." So they did, and I ended up getting hired for a game called Destroy All Humans. That was just serendipity. When they told me about this game, this was the 1950s, and they wanted this sort of retro Bernard Herrmann, The Day the Earth Stood Still kind of score. I said, "That's great." And they said, "Would you do a demo?" And I said, "No, I would do that." I said, because I sent them what I thought was just right in their Bernard Herrmann-esque music. So they hired me anyways, and which was very fortunate for me. And the audio director I worked on on that project, she went on to Irrational and to do BioShock. And she said, "Well, we got to hire Garry because I think he's a wonderful composer." And so it was really one thing led to the next. And because the folks at the Irrational, Ken Levine, didn't know who I was. And so that was a great opportunity. BioShock was really interesting. I mean, all the projects I've worked on, I've never been asked to do something as intriguing as that and given as much creative license. So that was really just luck, and then I everyone liked what I did. So that led to other opportunities as well. So very good. Luck plays a part in all this.
I think skill plays a lot with it too. I'm being honest with our last composer again, Mr. Kevin Sherwood, also tied with the Black Ops series and the Zombies. Kevin, how did you get into the video game business with the music?
I may be the only person here who intended to go into games, I think. Due to the fact of all the classes I dropped out of because of playing Warcraft 3 back in college. I needed to do something that I knew, and I heard that you could be a game tester in LA, and that seemed almost impossible. Like, you can make money playing games. I'm like, okay. So I left that night when I found out, and like $1,000 in my pocket out to LA. And, they actually didn't accept my resume to be a game tester, and I called the lady, and I had to go through voicemail to find her name, and I told her that she called me and I missed her call, which was bending the truth a little bit. And so they called me in for an interview, and then I just started telling people that I wanted to get into audio. And eventually I had a guy named David Vonderhaar who heads up the multiplayer for Treyarch, and he helped me out. Got into audio, and then I didn't think I'd ever be doing any music again, but at one point on World War, Sean graciously enough allowed me to do some guitar arrangements of his pieces, and learned a lot from him, and got some music into the game. And then a couple of guys in the company started making a mode called Nazi Zombies, which is
Which is just a hit now. I mean,
you can imagine what the bosses thought when they heard that.
I would have loved to be in that room for that pitch.
Right. So, but everyone loved it. It turned out to be a big hit, and I thought, it should be a cool song when you die. It's a weird mode, so let's do something weird. And I wrote a little riff to it, and that was it. But then my boss said, you should turn that into a whole song. And I'm like, who am I going to get to sing it? And then Elena walks in the room like, "Hey guys, I'm a producer." And I'm like, okay, we'll use her. So this literally happened in a course of a week and a half. I had to write something from nothing, and then it went out, and the community really liked it. So that allowed me to get away with doing that same process a couple more times. And then I met you, and now I'm here.
I'm going to ask a blanket question, and I want to go ahead and jump in on it. What are your feelings of the future of music and video games? I mean, obviously, going with the use of iTunes and a lot of the music sharing services and buying services on the internet, these soundtracks are actually turning into we just want the soundtrack. We're buying the soundtrack to listen to on our iPods, our Zooms, and whatever other MP3 players we have. What are your feelings on that? I mean, I mean, obviously you guys are putting the work in. I mean, there's a lot of work involved in these soundtracks. And how do you feel about that? Is it kind of weird to you that I wrote for video game and now people are just are buying this audio from us, or buying the CD, or buying the music off of the iTunes?
I don't think you write with the intention of selling music on iTunes. First of all, it's not a big income stream for me. But that said, I mean, it's great. But you write for the game. You write the best music you can for the project you're hired for. And then if there's a demand or it doesn't cost very much. It used to cost a lot of money to put out a CD. And nowadays, it doesn't cost very much at all. You can basically upload that music to iTunes and Amazon MP3, and it with almost no cost associated with it because the music already exists. So it's easy, and now it's just so easy, and the access is so. Although, if you search probably any one of our names, the free MP3 download is one of the first things that comes. So file sharing is still takes a lot of those.
Well, here's a caveat as well. For guys in our business, resources are everything. If you work in television, which has small budgets, you're liable to do a synth score that has 2 or 3 live players on it, and the time constraints it's a quick turnaround. So you have maybe 4 days to write, and then you have to mix it, get it on the air, turn around and do it again. In video games, the budgets have grown exponentially.
I mean, you're working with movie budgets now.
Not the hugest movie budgets. I had 80 guys on Uncharted, which is a lot of guys. A big movie budget might be 100 guys. But 80 guys is enough to sound really good. So you have time to make something that you're proud of. And I'm glad that these things have a life of their own, because you never take for granted when you have those kind of resources. You never take it for granted. You never know if that'll be ongoing. You'll have the same resources or more 10 years from now, or if not. So you just be thankful that someone is giving you the money and paying the bills so that you can write something to be performed by really good players. And how lucky is that for us? And remember, when you started in the 90s, I don't even know what resource. I mean, the game engines are changing so drastically that they can now do something sophisticated that they never could do years ago. So they're able to use the music in a cool way and in a sophisticated way because the engine allows you to do all these things. So we're really at the advent of something really interesting, I think.
Actually, I think that the reason is, more than everything is you guys. Because, I compose so many TV episodes for very popular shows for kids. Never got one email. When they did one game, and my email was just not that everybody liked it, somebody anyways,
We'll just say everybody liked it.
Exactly. So basically, I mean, I feel that the gamers, not even the avid gamers, but every gamer just cares so much about every aspect that has to be with the video game, and including the scores. They write about it, they listen, they buy. They are if you see, this is the difference between TV and games. TV, or a movie, you just watch it, you sit and watch. But games, you actually play, and they feel very active in the whole, production, creative, and activity with the game. And we feel it. We feel the vibe and the whole recognition that music for games has grown. It's just amazing for us, really.
And the listener to a game, he's living with your music for hours and hours and hours and weeks and months at a time, and he's listening to that over and over and over again. So you get a lot more connected to the music in a video game than you would any feature film or television show, just for this sheer amount of time that you're experiencing it. So, when people hear something on their favorite multiplayer map or, their favorite menu, and that comes on, it's like, oh my God, I get to relax now and play my favorite game, and there's my favorite cut. So it makes sense that you would want to go out and then buy the soundtrack or rip it, whatever.
Enjoy it.
Enjoy it, yes.
That kind of ties into my next question regarding I know Kevin and I actually do play Black Ops Zombies together. So I'm going to direct this question to you first, Kevin, because you do have a very, I know your community just because I've been involved with you in gaming quite a bit. How do you enjoy the community? I mean, obviously it's something that's tied to the gaming. I mean, the gamers are very, like you said, are very avid and very passionate about what they're doing. So how are your feelings on that whole community vibe?
Well, like Inon and Sean said, with games, it's so interactive. You know, you constantly have people giving feedback to say, like, multiplayer, like, you know, bring back the no-scoping or something like that. And when you have that amount of interaction, they feel free to say whatever they want about the music as well. So we start making the music interactive. For instance, like, my songs are part of an Easter egg, so you actually have to unlock, and sometimes they're tied to the achievements. So now we're using music as part of the gameplay that you can get rewards for. But the community has been invaluable in both compliments and a large amount of criticism about, especially some of the newer tunes. They come on the YouTube page and Facebook, and I'm able to communicate with them. Like, for instance, like, if I'm doing something like this, I can tell them where I'm at. We do live streams with, you know, guys like you and Boasty, where we can have, you know, 200 people instantly come in there into a chat channel and watch us play live, and then it just helps, I don't know, communicating your ideas when you're going to release something, and just keeping them involved and letting them have their opinion on, you know, something that you can do, that you can very much use.
Very cool. The rest of you guys, do you I mean, obviously, you're talking about your emails that you've gotten regarding your music and what you're doing with the games. Do the rest of you, when you got into the gaming, obviously with the newer games, did that kind of pick up for you? Did you start getting a lot more, a bigger fan base on the game side of things? Did it just kind of like all of a sudden, it's like, wow, I'm starting to get a lot of this stuff because of this game? Or is it kind of surprising to you? Or
people care about this music,
They do. That's right.
which makes it great. I mean, you know, we're lucky to be working and to be creative, but it's fantastic that people really love your music and appreciate it and want to know more about it. Contact it. It's very, very much appreciated, and it's a great part of this.
One capacity that you have in video game which you don't have in movies or TV is you could turn off the lousy music. You know, and so we should feel very lucky if we get some comments from players. Not that we don't think that the reviews are important. They're very, very important. But just to get like a direct review or comment from a player, it means a lot. And the fact that they did not turn down the music, you know, after playing hours and hours and hours for an online game or an RPG, man, that says a lot.
Oh yeah, those games last for days.
Yeah.
So you know what? I'm going to take a few questions. Does anyone have a question? Go ahead.
One question in 42 parts. It's mainly for Kevin. Kevin, I'm Ben. We're a huge fan.
I remember you're from the Facebook.
Yeah, exactly.
Glad you can come out.
Absolutely. The whole reason was because of the media, and you're reaching out. In fact, I think I suggested, hey, you should do an online. You said, how about if I showed up in person?
Right.
So awesome that you're here. What kind of gear are you guys using? You know, what are you writing with? When it comes down to it, is it just nothing more than a laptop and a controller, and you guys are just going at it? I mean, to what extent do you guys write the music and compose it and actually create it?
Well, I'll start this one off, but these guys have much more experience in that than I do. But I use Logic for anything I'm doing, like with synth orchestral stuff. But as far as the rock tunes go, I try to cost Activision nothing when I make it. So I use drum samples and triggers so I can kind of play them in, and I have a bass and DI that I use, and then a guitar amp emulator. And then we do all the vocal recording in the audio studio at Trayer with the guys in the audio department. So we take zero budget doing it, and we try to match it up with recordings that we hear. So
that becomes a bonus.
Legitimate, yeah. They like the fact that it doesn't cost anything to begin with.
That's fantastic.
Or cost very little.
Hey, how about the rest of you guys? What does it take to write? I mean, obviously it takes quite a bit.
I mean, 20 years ago, you had to have a studio and musicians. Nowadays, because of the technology and because of software, you can sort of recreate an orchestra in software. Generally, I mean, I always have felt, and I still do, that real players make a huge difference. But you can certainly mock it up, and you're working for someone, you have to get their approval. If they don't like something, they let you know, and you fix it, change it, whatever, modify it. But then in the end of that process, generally, I get an orchestra and we report that and then mix that in with my samples. But obviously, there's all this great technology out there. I use an application called Digital Performer. It uses Logic. These are common applications, and then tons and tons of samples and sounds that I have and buy constantly that add to my palette of sounds, from orchestral to all kinds of effects and you name it. So it's really, like everything these days, software and computers have made really enormous strides in what we're capable of technologically. It used to be composers the film composers had a piano and paper and pencil, and that was the extent. But nowadays it's a whole new world.
So you know what? I actually have one more. I have a question. When it comes to composing for a video game, obviously this is something that has to start early on because they need an idea. You guys get the idea of what sound they're looking for, what the game's going to be about. Do you actually get kind of similar to how they did it? I don't know how they do it in movies now, but back in the day in the movies, you'd have the movie playing and be able to see and feel what that's going to look like. So do you get a preview of what the game looks like prior to writing the song, so you kind of get the feeling for each part of that, where that's going to go? Or does the company get that, you pretty much bring them the music and they say, well, this is going to sound good in this part of our game?
No, usually, the company usually being brought out to the process very early, so there's almost nothing. So we get some concept art, which is really cool. We get some, very, very basic definition. But, big part of writing for computer games is just using your imagination, because there's not a lot to work with. There's no pictures, there's no movies, there's nothing basically. Vague descriptions.
Sometimes I do the game is sufficiently advanced that I get they'll play the game in the section that they want me to compose for. They'll tell me, I will get an in-depth description of what they want the music to do. And then I'll understand the game. But they'll actually do a video capture of gameplay. And though the player experience will not be locked to that, because everyone plays the game differently and different things trigger music, there's interactivity. But it'll just give you a feel and a vibe for that, what's going on visually and what you're doing at that time, which is I find very helpful. But as Inon says, you don't always get that. Sometimes you're involved and you need to write music based upon very basic art concept or just descriptions by the audio director.
I've started all of my game projects with cutscenes that were static scenes with some dialogue, and that helps me establish a tone for the game. And then I'll get gameplay playthroughs of levels that I'll score just like I would score a motion picture.
I have a question for you, actually, Sean. When you were writing the score for the Black Ops for single player, obviously the single player is Vietnam-based. Did the music at that time have any influence on your writing?
Originally, we discussed a lot about bringing in elements from the 60s. Okay. And as the game moved away from being about Vietnam and more about covert operations all around the world, the game really developed. I worked on it for a year, so I was there very early on. And it changed quite a bit from the beginning to the end. So as it became less about the Cold War in Vietnam and more about Black Ops and a time period of about 8 or 9 years, then I saw that the world opened up musically. And we were in Southeast Asia, so I could combine some of the elements of the locales there. We were in Kazakhstan, so I was able to use more Russian-influenced themes. So we really globe-trotted, and I would, try and use attributes and ethnicities from those areas. But I was more interested in getting a psychological focus with the music more than anything. And it was all about the paranoia of the Cold War and all about, just being covert and being a badass. So
you get that feeling, yeah. Well, again, with all the music and all these games, again, without that music, I think the games would just kind of be an empty slate. It'd be like I get to shoot this guy. Okay. You know, we don't get that. You know, we get that sense of feeling. We get that heart pounding. The music's building up. We know something's going to happen, but we don't know what. You know, and I think that's the feeling with all the gamers is without this music, we wouldn't have that feeling in our games. It wouldn't be like us actually being in a movie and playing that movie and being a part of this. So I think the music helps with bringing us back to that. So thank you. Do I have any more questions? You got first.
Yeah, I have read some articles before about how music is being more of a dynamic force in games. Sometimes, like if you're in a fight scene or something, the music will pick up, and if you're in a slow-paced section, the music will be really low key. How much does that come into when you guys compose music?
Right, interactivity is getting more and more sophisticated as the technology permits, which means at times we're writing our music and essentially writing it. Well, there's a lot of different techniques that are evolving, and it really depends on the game and the audio director you're working with. But very often you'll write the music in layers, meaning that all the music can work together at once. Maybe there's 3 layers. But if you mute one of the layers and then bring it in, that adds intensity so that the player's experiences in combat and all of a sudden you're off in a firefight, that top layer will quickly fade in and generating more intensity. And then if you escape from that or would hide away or something like that, then that layer can also be faded out. So yeah, that's interactive aspects of the music, which is one of the main ways that it is different from film and TV, because that obviously doesn't operate in that fashion.
Kind of along with like the interactive music part, like do you structure your music a little differently for video games than for like TV shows and stuff like that? And like how much of a role do you play in like controlling the interactive, how it plays in the interactive parts?
Every studio is different. I mean, every different developer has a different way of implementing the music, different sound engines. With Black Ops, Kevin knows the sound engine intimately, but my approach is much more cinematic. It's more like writing for a motion picture. Even when you're working on a long section of gameplay, you're not going to hit as many points throughout the gameplay because you know that it's going to change randomly. But if you score it like a film, it's going to be dynamic and exciting anyway. But, there's limitations with some engines, and it depends on how much audio you have going. Black Ops and the Call of Duty material has a lot of ambient sound effects, many layers of audio. So you're limited what you can do with the audio engine for music.
Along the lines of all this layering, how much do you guys have to stay thinking about key signature and time? Because as things change quickly, I notice on some games that, you're going things where there's like no relativity between keys whatsoever. And on other things where it's just seamless, and you're like, oh wow, you just switched minor and didn't even feel it.
Well, you have a technique that I'm using a lot in RPGs that actually variation. So basically, you take 1.5 minutes or 2 minutes cue, and you write it, and then you write 2 more versions of this cue but in different intensity. Now, the audio engine has this ability to follow, the cue and know, and when like you have, for example, more enemies coming towards you, then it'll pick up exactly where it left off, but in the higher intensity. So the transition is going to be totally seamless because it's essentially the same. It's the same cue. This is just one of the techniques. You try to write music. You don't try to limit yourself to something that will have a better transition. You just try to force the tools to your music rather than to force your music into the tools.
I do it a little bit differently. And it seemed to work, at least on the Uncharted series, which is instead of writing a 2-minute piece of music that is 2 minutes of nonstop music, I tend to write in 30 or 45-second increments that build to some sort of musical crescendo, leave a little bitty break, which you can fill with an ethnic instrument, and then start up again. If you do that, you can almost shift any key, and it's going to sound okay because the break makes it not sound like, F minor to E minor or something like that. So in leaving a little break, not only can they shift to a different piece, they can shift to any piece of music if they wanted a faster piece of music. And you don't have to always go exactly with the picture. The fact that you're fighting on screen doesn't mean music has to be big all the time. You have sound effects, you have sound design, you have all the things that fill it up. So whenever you break things apart like that, you serendipitously catch events that you never really caught. And Sony, who does the game implementation, I have nothing to do with it, always gets questions about how in the world did you script it? And they didn't script it. It just happened by virtue of the design of doing things that way.
And if there are jarring key changes or whatever, that's probably a mistake of implementation. I don't think they did a particularly good job in probably doing some of the things that perhaps you're talking about. I think that sounds like sloppy implementation. Right?
That would be the sound designer's fault.
But as the game engines are becoming more sophisticated, the choices that they have are much greater than they used to be, so they can do a better job with the music because the engine is more powerful, and then it depends on the musicality of whoever is doing the implementation and how they script the engine. So games are only going to get better.
Cool, thanks.
Go ahead.
The music that we heard at the top of this presentation sort of highlighted a theme that I've seen with a lot of A-list titles over the last few years, which is moving to music that is more epic in scope and more orchestral in design. Is this a conscious decision to move away from sort of the chiptune sounds of the 80s and the 90s, or is this just the way everything has evolved?
Well, obviously, quality, when we say quality, then we look at big budget, and many producers want their project to sound expensive. And so sounding expensive is sort of following what's going on in the motion picture world. And we do it, but in many cases, like for me with Fallout games, the game did not call for this kind of expensive sound. It's more of an ambient sound and more of a unique, weird score. So we're going for that. The budgets are way bigger, so we can allow ourselves to indulge in big orchestras, and that's the result.
Anyone else?
By the way, there's one addendum to that, and I don't know that this is necessarily consciously what games are thinking. I worked on a TV show called King of the Hill for years, which was an animation show. But when you do animation, and you don't have a real human being on the screen, it helps for the music to have human contact. And it's the same thing in games. You have a representation of a human, and it may have been done with mocap, but it still brings it to life more when the music has human beings breathing life in there. It makes it, and that's why most of the animated shows on TV use real orchestras, because it needs it, if that makes any sense. Does that make sense?
Yes.
You guys have such large ranges from going to TV, gaming. Musically, what are your influences? And do you guys try to emulate any of those musical influences to bring it to your work?
You mean steal someone else's lick? Which is how we all learn to do what we do.
I mostly, when I start a project, I listen to some of my favorite composers of the 20th century. I tend not to listen to any film score at all, because I just don't want that permeating my consciousness. So in preparation for Black Ops, I listened specifically to people of the Cold War era that were writing really avant-garde music at the time. A guy named Georgi Ligeti, who is very famous for his music that was used in 2001 Space Odyssey. Georgi Kurtag was another Hungarian composer. A lot of the people that were really writing that very suspenseful, paranoid kind of music from the Cold War. I love Arvo Part, he's one of my favorite composers. I love John Tavener, so I let those guys kind of permeate my mind while I'm preparing. and then I do whatever I do.
I listen to these guys, honestly, before and my list is pretty eclectic, but I need reference. Anytime I do anything, just to get ideas, there might be a chord change from who knows what genre that might inspire me. And when you transfer things like into the harder rock stuff, I try to look for more musical pieces and then take some of their chord ideas and bring them over into a heavier genre, and it just makes it sound cooler. So anything from Cannibal Corpse to Beethoven. So.
That is a huge area. It is funny because I was talking. Kevin's been here all weekend, and we got a chance to really talk about the music and stuff. And we were talking about you guys coming out. And he's like, "Wow!" He goes, "This is really weird meeting on Schyman because these are the guys that I look up to. These are the guys that I play their games. It's like, wow, this is great stuff." So
I'll be at their booth getting their autograph.
He'll be in line with you guys. So, but yeah, it's really especially your question. When growing up, obviously you guys have been in the music. You've been in the music for a while. Did you play instruments? Was there an instrument besides writing? Were you in bands? How did you
play the piano?
Did you?
I love playing the piano. I took lessons for many years and really I still enjoy playing the piano. And that influenced me. And I would say, composer-wise, I listen to the music of the 20th century composers especially, but I also am a big fan of Jerry Goldsmith and John Williams. I do listen to their music. Those two guys, and Bernard Herrmann as well. Those three composers make up an important part of what influences me musically, I think.
How about you, Greg? What's
You know what? I like film scores. I like guys who do film scores. I have no problem listening to music films because that's in essence what we're doing. There are tricks, there's innuendo that you can learn from how people did it. And they're just art. So, I'll listen to anything that gets the juices flowing.
Yeah.
And there's no easy answer for me.
Well, no, there's not. Obviously, being in the music industry, you're in the music industry. You're musicians, you're composers. I get the same question. I'm not even in the music industry. I get the same question. What do you listen to? Well, I listen to everything. I'm not going to say I only listen to this music because I'd be lying to you. I listen to everything, and I'm sure it's the same with you. You'll be driving in your car and it's like, oh, it's got a really good beat to it. It's got a really good, whoever wrote that back end of it, it sounds good. You may not like where it's coming from. You may not like the brand of music, but you know that whoever put their name on it knew what they were doing. So, do we have any more questions?
It's sort of maybe a two-part or pick and choose. Do you have a favorite song that you have composed for a video game, or are there any future projects that you're really looking forward to?
It's every or most, I would say 90% of the tune that I wrote yesterday was my favorite. No, but seriously, you have to think this way, because my way of thinking when I'm composing, everything that I'm writing today is supposed to be the best thing I ever did in my life. If I don't at least try to think this way, it's just, there's no point for it. You always try to stress yourself and to get yourself to a point that you have not been there before. And the same thing about projects. Projects pose a challenge, and we all like challenges. So, again, if it's something that is up to par to what, I don't know how to do rock. Kevin is doing it great, I'll call Kevin. But if it's something that I know I can do, good enough for me. All right.
Well, you know what? Can you take the question out of the booth?
Yeah.
Okay, good. I hate to cut it, guys, but we have some other panels coming up. I want to thank you for coming out. I want to thank you guys. Please stop by, ask some more questions, shake some hands, get some autographs and some pictures. I know some of the composers have brought some CDs with as well that they're willing to part with some autographs and pictures with too. So please come down, guys, and thank you so much for coming to our panel.